Hi, I'm Aria McKenna, and I am here with Green TV interviewing Ken Russell. This is his second term as City Commissioner for the Miami-Dade area, and he is currently running for Senate against Marco Rubio in Florida.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for covering this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, the Miami area is already seeing sunny day floods. You are in the forefront of sea level rise, and Florida is going to be the first state that we lose entirely to sea level rise. So you're on the forefront of massive climate migration, many, many other issues. And so I just can't tell you how happy I am to see someone with a platform that is so focused on the environment and helping to raise the issues that all Floridians should, and most of them actually do care about these issues. If there is any issue that I believe can unite both parties, it is the environment. It's the clean water, it's protecting the air that our children breathe, that we breathe, and cleaning up our health and protecting us from all the dangers around the climate crisis and multiple other environmental issues.
Well, if there's any silver lining to this heavy, heavy cloud, is that I have bipartisan support here because it is so bad. It's so palpable here, the issues we're dealing with, that I have the support, even in the minority on my commission, to pass all of the environment and climate legislation that I can bring to the table. Because our residents have our back. So we're insulated from that state and federal partisanship that surrounds the environmental discussion, fortunately.
I would just love you to explain what is the difference between you and Marco Rubio.
The difference between Marco Rubio and myself couldn't be more stark. Listen, voters need to do their homework. There's a political greenwashing of candidates to make everyone look like they're environmental, whether they truly are or not. And it's very hard for voters to dig deep on someone's legislative background and accomplishment, where their votes truly lied, and what money they took. And Marco Rubio's been on the wrong side of our environment and water quality for a long time. For my part, I really want voters to know that an environmental vote is not a vote thrown away. We've done the research. It is the number one issue in the state of Florida when you poll Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. The words water quality come out higher than anything, from crime to storm surge. Water quality is where it's at, and that means our residents recognize it. It's our environment and our economy. So your vote's not thrown away, but you got to do your homework. And my goal is to be the champion for the environment at the federal level, and in a sense, be your local elected at Washington. I want to work with all 400 mayors in the state of Florida to make sure they're accomplishing their goals and that they're not preempted, and that the Clean Water Act can be implemented properly, and that the Everglades can get restored, and that Lake Okeechobee's waters go where they should. Every corner of the state has its own water issue, and I'm learning them all in my 67 county tour. So if you'd like to learn more and do your research on me, you can certainly Google, but check out kenrussellforflorida.com. And vote intelligently. Please do your homework and pick your candidates wisely. Thanks.
So one of the things that I am most excited about is the fact that you support rights of nature. I would love to hear a little bit more about that in your words, and why this is an important issue for you to get behind.
Yes, not enough people know about it statewide, yes. And if it's going to get on the ballot, we need a lot of advocacy. I am an unofficial ambassador for rights of nature, and was blown away when I learned about this initiative. For me, it started with a contaminated park in front of my house. 6 years ago, I was not a legislator, I was not a commissioner, I knew nothing about land use law, environmental law, or even the science. All I knew was there was a contaminated park in front of my house. So my son and I went down and started asking questions of the contractors, and then we decided to learn the science, organize our neighborhood, and get that park remediated properly, because the city wasn't going to do it. We were successful for our neighborhood here, but then there were 5 other contaminated city parks. I decided to run for local office on an environmental platform, and became the city commissioner for Coconut Grove, Brickell downtown. What I learned at that point, I thought, all I have to do is have the political will to change these environmental laws, and that's all it's going to take. What I realized is we are preempted by state law as local elected officials from enacting most of the laws we would want to do. The reason is, as most people know, that these lobbyists for the industries that want to keep cities from changing their rules out of their favor, instead of lobbying 412 cities, they can just go to the state legislature and get something preempted, whether it's styrofoam, plastic bags, etc. And so the rights of nature really speaks to municipalities' ability to regulate clean water at a local level without the state getting in their way. And that's the Right to Clean Water ballot initiative that I'm really backing, and I'm a big supporter.
Absolutely. No, that's huge. Thank you so much. It's so important, and just to try to explain some of these issues a little bit more, because I think some of this gets rather complicated. And that the bottom line is that the state, our state of Florida, is getting in the way with restrictions against us being able to protect our clean water, protect our rivers, protect our springs. We have some of the most beautiful natural springs anywhere I've been, and to protect our coastlines. So the fact that our government works against our health and well-being and us being able to protect ourselves from such intrinsic issues gets at the inherent corruption of the system as well. So you mentioned lobbyists, right? So you've got all of these big moneyed interests coming in, having more influence because they have so much money, whereas a normal citizen feels disempowered. It's so wonderful that you got that sense of empowerment and that you kept going further and figuring out what you needed to do. It's an inspiration, I think, for so many people who may feel that there's nothing they can do. So, yeah.
Thank you. We all can do, and it's
Yes.
it's all about finding that path, that strategy, and it's not easy because there's a lot of hurdles, a lot of legislative, political, and legal hurdles that keep us from getting there. And it's ironic that the state legislature, primarily a conservative legislature, doesn't believe that the government that's closest to the people should be taking care of the people. Normally you would think they would say that, but in this case, if they can keep us at a city level from doing something that's against their the interest that they're lobbied for, they push that direction. So my specialty has been solving that Rubik's Cube of how to pass legislation that survives that preemption. For example, we had a huge rash of construction sites not controlling their runoff, and a heavy rain would wash all of their cement, sand, and dirt out into our storm drain system and out into the bay. And I realized we were preempted by state from fining them any more than $300 a day. That's not going to dissuade any construction site, especially in the city of Miami, where many of these are multi-billion-dollar developments. So I looked at our code and wrote an ordinance that specifically could not be preempted and would survive legal challenge. So what happens now in the city of Miami, if a resident sees silting out into the bay, they see a plume of silt that gets out there, they can send a picture in an email to the city of Miami. Within 1 hour, the Public Works Department is out there tracing the silt up through the storm drain system. Then they're joined by the code department and the building department that go to that construction site where they trace it, and they issue a stop work order. And that's under the building permit. Under our city code, we can stop any construction site that we permitted for a violation of the code. Then they cannot come on site until they have remediated what they have silted, fixed their runoff containment, and only then can they continue construction. Now they're losing time. And this is the most valuable thing to development, much more than the value of a dollar any given day. And we've also deployed our police and an environmental crimes unit to make sure nobody goes back on that construction site until it's fixed to the satisfaction of our department. This is one example of things I've done for glyphosate, fertilizer, styrofoam, and so these are the things. It's a puzzle, but we can solve it. The will is there. If I can find the politics and find the legal avenues, we can change the rules for the better.
Absolutely. Everything is interconnected. I love that you are bringing that interconnectivity up. Obviously, we've got certain industries who are focused on their profit above the impact, and they have not been asked to pay for the cost that they're putting out there to everyday people. So the specific industries in Florida, for instance, that are, I know we've got big sugar issues, we've got agricultural issues, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to how it is that those specific industries are damaging our environment and the types of policy changes that we need to support in order to prevent that damage, especially, for instance, with the massive fish kills that we're seeing in Florida and many other places. I mean, the Gulf Coast or the Gulf of Mexico has thousands of miles that are just completely dead zones where nothing can survive because of agricultural runoff. So this is obviously a much bigger issue than Florida, but these are some main issues that Florida is seeing. If you could speak to that.
Sure. Well, we're all in this together, right? Industry's not going away. Agriculture's not going away. So the question is, how do we cohabitate without ruining our environment? How does industry and the economy thrive? And of course, we know that if the environment dies, the economy dies too. So we're all incentivized to get this right. However, obviously, the industries want, right? They want their way. And it creates this binary fight of us versus them. And then it's painted as if all the conservatives are in favor of industry and all of the progressives are in favor of the environment. We need to come to the table to solve these issues in a way that sticks, in a way that survives challenge. And so for me, it's always about understanding your enemy, right? If sugar is the problem, what is it they're trying to accomplish? What is it they need and what is it they don't really need? What are they really trying to accomplish here? And for them, it's water. For them, they want the water for their agriculture. It's not just about the chemicals that they use or the burns. The biggest impact they're having on our state is their hunger for water, or their thirst, I guess. And so that drives them to want to control the entire plumbing of our watershed to service their needs. Of course, at our expense, for the communities, our drinking water, for the Everglades, for the estuaries on the coastlines, they're all becoming a victim of Big Sugar's thirst for water. And so the gatekeeper to that is the Army Corps. They control the plumbing of the state. So from my perspective, it was, all right, we can solve this. It doesn't just have to be, yelling at the man. We can find a solution here, because right now the Army Corps is going through a new scheduling process of how they manage the lake and the Everglades. And I realize this multi-year process is coming to a head right now. City of Miami had never been in that fight before, but we're a victim of it as well. Because the water from Lake Okeechobee that ends up in the estuaries, causing a supercharged red tide or a blue-green algae that's causing fish kills on the East Coast, should be filtering through the Everglades, cleaned and heading through the Everglades to full Everglades restoration. And even though Miami's way south of the lake and at the bottom of the Everglades, that fresh water that comes into the Everglades recharges our aquifer for drinking water for millions of Miami residents. And it also staves off, it creates a freshwater pressure on the saltwater intrusion in our aquifer as well. So we're vested in this. So I passed a resolution at the City of Miami Commission deploying our city in this discussion. And it brought the largest city in South Florida to the table. And Sugar was not expecting that. So our 26 in-house city attorney staff, our 9 Tallahassee lobbyists, we're all now tasked with making sure that water quality and Everglades restoration was the priority. Sugar probably didn't see it coming, but it was about building a coalition then of other cities to agree with us so we could help get the right solution from the Army Corps.
That is absolutely beautiful. Now, what about agriculture in general, industrial agriculture that we have all just grown to depend on and not think much about, versus other types of, permaculture, for instance, and getting rid of those nitrogen fertilizers and the impacts that has. I heard you passed an ordinance that has some restrictions on the types of fertilizers that can be used, because unfortunately so many people are using these fertilizers daily, and they're just trying to create a really beautiful environment around them. Maybe they have a home garden and they want the vegetables to grow and flourish, and they don't know about the damage that they're doing not only to our climate but also to our water through the use of these common fertilizers.
Yes, and there was not a fertilizer ordinance before I came into office, and I passed one of the strongest ones in the state. And then when some other cities started taking it on as well, we sort of got into this one-upping each other for the most robust fertilizer ordinance, which is great. There's a rash of fertilizer ordinances around the state now, And in the city of Miami, you cannot use fertilizer. It's not about the sale, which is preempted. It's about the use, which we can control. Even in a residential setting or a commercial setting, you can't use fertilizers during the rainy season or within 20 feet of a water body ever. And that's very important. And we also talk about the types of fertilizers. This has a big impact, even though it's very hard to regulate because no one's watching me in my backyard. But for example, I have 1,000 towers in the city of Miami that are on the water and in town, and they all have HOAs, and they all have maintenance teams, mow and blow maintenance teams. And so I partnered after passing the legislation with each one of those HOAs to make sure they are directing their companies that service their landscaping to follow our rules. And so it's all possible, but that's a microcosm. My city, even though it's one of the largest in the state, it's a microcosm to what the actual agriculture industry is doing. And so when you think of the lake and the watershed below it, trying to mitigate that water flow so that the nutrients that are in the lake don't go where they're not supposed to, that they get scrubbed and cleaned and go where they are supposed to, it's only half the argument. The other discussion has to be about where is the nutrient coming from, the point source pollution from the polluters, and that starts a whole new finger pointing argument as well. This is a big part of why I'm running for United States Senate and not a local seat or even a congressional seat in a region of the state. I want to take a look at the Clean Water Act that is a federal law that is not being implemented. It's not being regulated. It's not being enforced. The federal government ceded their control over the Clean Water Act to the state, and the state is compromised. The state legislature is compromised. The state executive is compromised. So the federal government needs to either force the state to do their job through lawsuits or oversight, or take it back. And the federal government needs to do its job in saying the Clean Water Act is our responsibility. It is our fault if we are allowing polluters to pollute our waterways. And neither, no one within our statewide leadership at the state or federal level has made that a priority. And so the polluters get away with murder.
It's fascinating to me when I think about the kind of impact that the Clean Water Act could actually have. If we actually implemented it and we were to use it on a wide scale basis, that would solve our agricultural issues, that would solve the issues when it comes to fracking and the waste associated with that, the radiation toxicity associated with that, and the fact that these toxic waters left over from fracking are generally used to water our agriculture.
Yeah.
So it's humongous to see how just a couple of particular issues and solutions focused thinking could have such a widespread impact on so many other issues. So I feel like you're just focusing on all of the right things when you're talking about Clean Water Act and when you're talking about rights of nature and our ability to empower citizens through a rights of
anybody
nature
can
ordinance.
do this. I'm nobody special. Literally, before this job as a legislator in a local city government, I was a surfboard salesman, and before that, I was a professional yo-yo player. Believe it or not, I was a professional yo-yo player traveling the world, around the world, playing the yo-yo. So I have no background in this any more than any resident or neighbor. So the parallel of me taking on the city, in my case, is very similar to the parallel of me now in a city position taking on the federal government. I prepared a lawsuit this thick against the Florida Department of Transportation just last month because they were not controlling their construction sites that were polluting our bay. But instead of just filing that lawsuit and going into years of court, I brought that lawsuit to the local district secretary and said, hey, are you ready to fix this? And she said yes. So they have implemented the changes that we requested as a city, as a little city. Even though we're the city of Miami, we're nothing compared to the Florida Department of Transportation. And they agreed. They don't need this headache. They want to do it right. They were just being lazy about holding their contractors accountable. So instead of suing them and causing a nightmare, I was able to get them to fix their ways. And the last several storms have held their silting out of our bay.
Wow, that's absolutely...
Anyone can do this.
It's fascinating. It's inspiring. So speaking of rights of nature, and how it is that empowers citizens, I would love for you to speak a little bit more about. So now, a rights of nature ordinance recently passed in the city of Orlando. I worked on that a bit myself. I know a lot of other people who have worked on that particular issue, and it passed with overwhelming support. I think it was like 86% or something like that. And Florida is a Republican state.
The rights of nature, the Florida Five, they're all different but interconnected concepts that are going on the ballot, or hopefully getting on the ballot if enough people sign petitions.
Yes.
But the one that's most, I think, that has the greatest chance of really getting a home run is the right to clean water. In environment, in many situations when you're trying to get legislation passed, the messaging is so important, right? The branding, if you will, that gets people for it or against it. And what passed in Orlando, I might not actually be able to pass that in the city of Miami, and I'll tell you why. I mentioned that I'm in the minority on a gerrymandered city to be one of the few Democrats on my nonpartisan dais, but we all know where each other stand. It's a pretty conservative dais. Property rights are a huge thing here in Florida, in South Florida, where the majority of my commission actually was born in Cuba, right? Mm-hmm. And so for them, and this doesn't, it seems like it's going off on a tangent, but it isn't. For me to even strengthen our tree ordinance is opposed by conservative legislators who feel that that's the government telling you what you can do with your own property, right? And so I've been able to pass these ordinances by making sure I'm very careful with the messaging. My city is gerrymandered to be very conservative, and the majority of my commissioners were born in Cuba, where their properties were taken away from them. So even when I try to strengthen a tree ordinance, which talks about what trees you can cut and not cut on your own property, I get a lot of pushback. They say, whoa, property rights. And property rights trump everything for them. So the rights of nature, if it's perceived that they trump the property rights of an individual, I wouldn't be able to pass that. But if I said, do you all gentlemen believe that we have the right to clean water, right, I will have a unanimous vote.
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic for that ballot initiative on the right to clean water, and it will have a significant impact for how municipalities can regulate their local waters.
Absolutely. No, that's huge. Definitely very appreciated. It's interesting. I just want to bring up a point that comes to mind when you talk about property rights is that, yes, it's your property while you own it. That's the way our legal system is set up. It's never going to be your property forever, right? So having that sense of responsibility for who's going to take the property next, of course, is important to me.
Beyond that, what you do on your property affects all of us.
Yeah.
If my fertilizer use is running off into the street and the bay, if the cutting down of the trees is reducing the canopy, I may even affect my next door neighbor's home value if I reduce the canopy so significantly.
Yeah.
So we need to think of it in that way. But that's where it takes the leadership of legislators and regulators to make those hard decisions so that we all move forward for the better. In the city of Miami, I've written the state's strongest benchmarking legislation, which measures our carbon output and our water efficiency for all 1,000 towers in our city that are over 20,000 square feet. Orlando has a similar one, but ours goes further in that it forces those towers to adjust, to retune every 5 years and invest in those buildings to improve their efficiencies. The way I got that passed on a conservative property rights dais, where how can you tell me to be more efficient,
right, is
I made sure that any improvements you do have to self-liquidate its cost in 3 years. Meaning if you put in storm windows to reduce, or if you do efficiencies that'll lower your electricity bills, the savings must outweigh the investment within 3 years. A new roof, for example, from controlling leaks or solar panels that offset energy costs. And so that just passed this year. And so now every year they must measure how efficient each building is being, so we get a baseline. And then I passed a climate emergency and a carbon neutral goal by 2050. So now we have a metric by which to get there,
right,
and a carrot and stick by which to get the buildings to do it.
Fantastic. And I also hear that you passed a ban against styrofoam. Is it styrofoam and plastics, or
no? That was the hardest one. The preemptions around those are so strong. So I've eliminated the ability for people to bring styrofoam into our parks. With the big one I passed was glyphosate. Now that's the chemical in Roundup.
Right.
And even though I'm preempted on that one as well, what I did was I eliminated government use of glyphosate. I found out one department in the city of Miami was using 5,000 gallons a year. That's one of those big tanker trucks of glyphosate pure, and just using it in the streets and sidewalks to kill weeds. And of course that goes right into the bay. So that one ordinance had a huge impact, but of course I'm not able to go further than that, so I don't. I'm not in this just to pass a law to look good or yell about something. I want to have something that sticks and makes a difference.
Could you speak to the impact of glyphosate? Glyphosate?
Yeah, glyphosate.
Glyphosate.
Yep.
Okay. Could you speak to the impacts of glyphosate, and also is there anything we can do to expand bans on styrofoam, things like that? I mean, I think raising awareness is key. Obviously, hotels, things like that are using them in huge capacities. It's such a shame.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's hard to find the political will to get it done, and then you've got to find the legal ability to keep it in place.
Right.
Miami Beach did try, and what we found is that cities who had the ordinances in place prior to state preemption were able to get grandfathered in some cases, but those who brought it afterwards were not. So if you can't regulate, I would rather change practices. For example, here in Coconut Grove, if you go to the restaurants and the hotels, you will still see them using plastic utensils or takeaway boxes of styrofoam. And it's just a cost issue for those restaurants. They're not really thinking about it. But we're a waterfront community with a lot of storm drains to the bay. We want to incentivize them to change their habits. So I also am the chairman of the Coconut Grove Business Improvement District. And using that role, I'm trying to set an example with them and show them they can get actually more customers by being environmentally conscious. And so we're creating a program with Surfrider where restaurants will actually be recognized for their new practices, and the BID, the Business Improvement District, will help invest in the difference in cost for the first few years so they get adjusted.
That's absolutely beautiful. I love that you represent business, you represent citizens, and you're talking about putting it all together, bringing it into policy as well. We need to be able to look out for businesses. We also need to protect individuals and protect our children in future generations. So thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing. Absolutely thrilled to see someone with such a strong environmental platform running for such a major audience, running for such a major position, and to reach that wider audience and help to shift the tides in awareness, because that really is the bottom line, is that we need more people out there understanding what's at stake and understanding that we can do it, that there are policies that we can get behind that will make a massive impact for all of us and for our future generations and also for our economy and our ecosystems. So that's why we're here with Green TV doing what we're doing, getting out the word, helping to give voice to candidates like this who are making a difference in the world and showing that every single one of us out there can use our own individual power as activists, as community members, as business people. Anything, any place that you are, there's something that you can do to raise awareness and make a difference. So thank you so much for all your help in that, and thank you, our audience, for continuing to be on this journey with us. I'm Aria McKenna with Green TV, and this is Ken Russell. Thank you. Vote.